You get heated seats both for the rider and the passenger, which is good if you like to keep your buns nice and toasty. As I say, it's a very smooth and orderly affair. I thought that was a little bit cheeky. Hello and welcome to my long-term review of the 2020 Triumph Tiger 900 Rally Pro. In this video, I'll talk you through my experiences so far, what the bike is like on-road, what it's like off-road, what I like about the bike, what I don't like about the bike. I'll do a little bit around costs as well. And just things to look out for when you've owned one of these for, a little while. So whether you're a current owner, whether you're looking to get one of these yourself, or you're more of a curious passerby, stick around and stay tuned. So this is the 2020 version of this one. Triumph have come up with a 2024 version later on, which does come with a bit of a power upgrade. I can't remember what the precise number is in terms of horsepower, but I think it is something like around about 145. This original 2020 version comes with 94. Between you and me, what I suspect has happened in that case is that Triumph originally aimed this kind of at the A2 market, so that this would be restrictable down to about 47 horsepower. They've probably realized in the years since that nobody really buys it for A2 purposes to restrict it, so they've probably just squeaked out a bit more power since. In any case, for those who do want to look at the specs, obviously this bike has been out for a few years now. There's many review videos which have covered this very well and in depth, so I won't speak about them for too long, but I shall leave a spreadsheet here somewhere on the screen just for those who do want to have a quick look. In essence, what you're working with here is a bike that is go anywhere, do anything. It really is one heck of an all-rounder, and I think for some people who are looking for the kind of bike to do everything, that's possibly several bikes in one, this is the place to go. So in terms of sort of numbers and specs, you're working with an 888cc inline triple that produces around about 94 horsepower with 87 newton meters of torque. You're working with a 21-inch front wheel and a 17-inch at the rear. In terms of suspension, obviously with this having some level of off-road capability, you have 45mm shower forks at the front, which are fully adjustable. You also have a monoshock at the rear, which I also believe is fully adjustable as well. With this being the Rally Pro version, you do get a few extra bells and whistles, both physical and electronic as well. There's a few nice touches like various rider modes, including off-road modes. I believe there's the standard off-road and the off-road pro. The off-road pro mode you only get with this particular model. I believe the difference between the modes is mostly to do with ABS. I believe in the standard one, only the rear ABS is turned off. In the off-road pro, I believe it's both front and rear. Outside of electronics, things like heated grips, you get heated seats both for the rider and the passenger, which is good if you like to keep your buns nice and toasty. You also have the benefit of cruise control, which is a really nice touch, especially if you're doing plenty of motorway miles as well. I can tell you from personal experience how much that saves a bit of strain on my wrist over long periods of time. You also have the benefit of fog lights as well. They look very nice. I personally would question whether they're necessary, but I'm glad they're there. They look nice. With regards to stopping power, you have two discs up front and a single at the rear. If the discs up front are either 230 or 240 mil, you have Brembo Stylema twin pot calipers on each disc. They make for a very nice touch. They're often the kind of brakes that you find on much faster, much more sporty bikes. You also have a Brembo single pot at the rear, which is mounted on a 255mm brake disc. You also have a adjustable seat height of 850 to 870 millimeters. That is on the taller side of life. If you're a shorter rider, you may want to look into getting either a lower seat or a lower version of this bike, because I believe they do exist. You also have a 7-inch TFT display, which actually I have to say I'm quite impressed with. A lot of TFT displays on motorbikes aren't always the best laid out. The one on the Scrambler 1200 XC, for example, I don't even know what it is. It just looks terrible. But this one is particularly good. The layout of everything in terms of instrumentation and details is very clear and very concise, very easy to read, so no complaints there. So having owned this bike for about 15 months now, I have got a fair bit of use out of it. I've put about, I want to say, between 6,000 and 7,000 miles probably. As mentioned earlier, this is one of those bikes which is several bikes in one. You can use it for several things, and I think that's really the main appeal for a machine of this caliber. I've been able to use it for various trips across the country, one in Cornwall, one in the Cotswolds, one in Wales, certainly for doing long distance on the motorways. There are better machines out there. There's always something better out there, but it's pretty good. I mean, it's very comfortable. You do have nice touches which definitely help along the way, especially in colder weather. The handguards, for example, whilst practically useless off-road, do a good job of keeping sort of air and wind off your hands and gloves, just to keep them a bit more insulated, a bit more protected from the weather. The cruise control is a really nice feature on those sorts of things. I did take it, as mentioned briefly, just up to Wales for a week. It was raining constantly, almost every single day for that week, even though it was July, because Wales is Wales. And even in those conditions, it was absolutely solid, no complaints at all, even with a little bit of off-roading thrown in there too. That was 2-up and with a bit of luggage on the back as well. That was with the benefit of some accessories, which I'll get onto a bit later on in the video. But even then, it was very composed, no problem at all. I have used it for commuting in London as well. I do have a video of that if you want to get a good idea firsthand of what it's like to sort of maneuver through traffic. I'll include a link to that here somewhere, so if you want to check that out, please do. It's okay for filtering through traffic. It's a bit on the larger side, obviously, so it's not something I'd recommend for that purpose, but it can do it, and it can do a respectable job of it. If you want to have a bit of a blast on the weekend with your mates as well, you do have sort of quite a big engine in the form of a 900cc here, so it's more than capable of holding its own against much faster, more powerful bikes. You do have a nice little feature in the form of a quick shifter as well. Certainly slotting between gears is really rather satisfying, and if you want to use it for that purpose, it's more than capable of holding its own, even on these tyres as well, which again I'll get onto a bit later on. I must confess, my off-road experience with this bike is not that extensive so far, although I definitely will be planning to do a lot more of it going forward. The thing I will say about off-roading with this bike is that it does have its limits, but nevertheless there are a lot of things here that do help make this a palatable bike off-road quite well. You have the benefit of the 21-inch front wheel, which definitely helps a lot in terms of sort of ironing out a few small bumps. The suspension as well being fully adjustable, being 45mm in diameter at the front, helps with that as well. The narrow seat in the middle definitely helps when standing up on the pegs instead of moving around. I'll get on to another side note about that a bit later on. You also have spoked wheels as well, which can be used with tubeless tyres. The only thing I will say about off-roading with this bike is that you definitely should not do it with the stock tyres that come with it. I believe they're the Bridgestone AX41s, if I'm not mistaken. Those are fantastic road tyres. They are also good for a bit of touring, a bit of sports touring, that sort of thing. But for off-road, they are completely useless. does raise a bit of an eyebrow as to why Triumph decided to include those on this spec of bike. I think probably if they were being realistic with themselves, most people who own this bike aren't really going to take it off-road that much, if at all. But nevertheless, it is definitely a capable bike of doing it. I've only really ridden it on sort of light gravel trails so far, and you know, stuff that's a little bit more rocky and a bit more gnarly. But it's been absolutely fine. I mean, in my experience, I'm, well, 6'2", 6'3". I've off-roaded it briefly in Wales. Certainly standing up on the pegs with the seat in between you, it feels perfectly manageable. You do, of course, have the electronics on this as well in the rider modes, which are essential, I would say, for making a bike like this manageable off-road. Certainly having the full power of that engine off-road is just not viable at all. So it does go a long way to sort of dampening the power, dampening the throttle response, and also turning on and off ABS where necessary. So the electronics package there does help you out a lot. The suspension was absolutely fine as well. I'm a pretty heavy, chonky chap. I weigh in about 110, 120 kilos. These are the, as I mentioned earlier, the 45mm Showa upside down forks, which are fully adjustable. They felt absolutely fine. I'd never felt like I was going to bottom out at any stage. They felt perfectly plush and perfectly adequate for sort of absorbing all the little bumps and rocks and what have you. So no problems there at all. The last thing I will mention about off-roading, not only with this bike, but with this kind of bike in general, if you have tubeless tyres, is do be careful when you're adjusting the tyre pressures. Obviously, if you're going off-road, you need to make sure that you have different tyre pressures to what you have on the road. Also, the other thing to mention is that if you find yourself off-roading fairly frequently, it may be best to go for tubed tyres. Adjusting the pressure of the tyres that frequently does have an impact on the seals around it, and you may find over time that you start to lose air for no reason because you've sort of negatively affected the seals of the tyres on the rims. But being tubeless wheels in this case, adding tubes depending on what tyre you have is generally not that much of an issue. For off-roading, I would say if you're doing sort of fire trails, gravel trails, as long as you don't involve, I would say, a large quantity of very gnarly rocks or vast quantities of gloopy, thick, deep mud, you'll be absolutely fine on this. No problem at all. The tyres that come with this bike as stock are really indicative of the intended use purpose, despite being a more off-roaded orientated model. The Bridgestone AX41s, they're fantastic for, you know, sort of more sport touring uses. They're a good all-rounder. The features that you have on here, which make it good off-road, do have the double benefit of making it good on-road as well. The suspension does help to give the bike quite a composed feel, I would say, as well. Certainly sitting quite high up, you get quite a commanding view of the road position ahead. The screen is also fully adjustable manually, so that does give you a nice amount of weather protection, and if you find you need to adjust it mid-ride, you can literally just reach over, if it's safe to do so, of course, and then just sort of adjust it up and down. So you have a number of nice features there, which do help to provide quite a composed and smooth experience as well. Even at higher speed with quite a powerful engine, it feels oddly, I wouldn't say, I definitely wouldn't say it's a boring experience going at higher speeds on this bike, but as I say, it's a very smooth and orderly affair. It's certainly doing 60 miles an hour on this doesn't feel quite as sort of exhilarating or thrilling as the Speed Twin. Definitely not boring by any means, but not the sort of most thrilling experience at higher speeds, I would say. The power of the engine, the brakes that you have on there, they really do mean that you can take this up to sort of more fun and exciting speeds if you wish to do so. It's definitely more than capable of doing that. For touring, you do have the benefit of things like cruise control and heated grips. These certainly going through Wales and certainly going through a country where it was raining every single day really helped me out a lot and really helped to make the overall experience better as well. In terms of fuel economy, which is everyone's favorite subject, I'm sure, I was able, on a long trip recently down to the West Country, I was able to get about 50 miles per gallon. Just putting it in the standard road mode. I mean, for a big thirsty engine like this, I would say that's pretty good. Passenger comfort and space is very good as well. I'll leave a brief clip here just so you can see what it's like to up with myself and my partner. Certainly from her side, very roomy, very comfortable over long distances. No complaints there. If you are a passenger on this bike, you do of course have the benefit of your own heated seat and your own dedicated 12-volt power socket as well. So if you need to charge your phone going along, then happy days. Certainly with regards to riding at night, which is the last thing I'll mention about road riding, the headlights, I have to say, are absolutely fantastic. You do have dedicated daytime running lights, which is quite a nice feature to have, especially if you are interested in sort of how the bike looks as you're riding along. That's quite a nice feature. But even low beam, high beam, they're all LED, including the fog lights as well. So certainly for riding at night, you get plenty of visibility. I'm probably not going to include a shot of that here because, as we all know, if you try filming at night with lights on, you're just not going to get an accurate representation of what that looks like. But taking my word for it, if you're happy to, the lights on this at night are absolutely fantastic. I'm going to move on to the 5 things I like about this bike. First of all, I'll start with the overall looks, which I'm particularly impressed with, I have to say. That's okay. I think yeah, just in a massive bird of prey, just attack the bird feeder. Not good. R.I.P. Moving on. What the hell? Anyway, coming on to the looks of this bike, I have to say, I think Triumph have done an absolutely fantastic job all around, especially considering its genre as well. Adventure bikes obviously are not necessarily renowned for being the best looking bikes. A lot of people like to sort of have a reference to the sort of the beak or the front mudguard, which often looks quite distasteful. Certainly with this bike all round, it's absolutely fantastic. This was designed by a man called Rodolfo Frescoli, an Italian designer, and I think even sort of commuting, going around fairly often in London, it does regularly get quite a lot of compliments, I have to say, often out of nowhere. So big thumbs up for the overall looks and appearance. The fit and finish as well just looks fantastic. At number 2, not that these are in any particular order of course, is the screen and how everything is very neatly laid out. I did briefly mention it earlier in the video, so I won't repeat myself too much, but everything is very clearly laid out. Everything's very easy to read. You do have the benefit of a sort of dark nighttime mode as well. Which obviously just makes the background black, so it's not too bright as you're going along at night. You can switch it between sort of like a daytime and nighttime mode. Personally, I just have it on the black screen all the time. It's perfectly easy to read in daylight conditions, even on sunnier days than this rather gloomy day. But yeah, number 2, very well laid out. Number 3, I would say, is probably the switch gear. Everything, again, just like the screen, everything is positioned quite sensibly. You don't have anything that's sort of in the wrong place. The only minor point I would say is that sometimes you do confuse the joystick with the indicator, but not very often. You quickly get used to it. But yeah, all the buttons are very thoughtfully laid out. They all have a nice tactile feel to them, and they're all backlit as well. Not something you see too often. So a very nice touch there. In at number 4 is the overall unique nature of the bike itself. We often see with a lot of manufacturers today, especially the big Japanese ones as well, that they tend to like copy and paste engines and frames from different bikes and different models. I don't have a problem with that at all. I think if you're looking to make an affordable bike for which there is demand, that's absolutely fine. Certainly models like the Tenere 700 have a fantastic engine in them. The only downside of that is that it does arguably subtract from the character and the unique feel of the bike. This engine, to my knowledge, is not used in any of the other Triumph models, nor is the frame. It therefore makes it rather unique and special to this particular model. So I find it quite appealing on that front for that reason. Number 5, I would say, again, I've mentioned it briefly, is the lights. They are absolutely fantastic. They're very good for going around at night, all LED. They do a fantastic job of what they're supposed to do. And they also add quite nicely to the aesthetics. So those were the 5 things I like about this bike. And in this section, I'm going to talk about the 5 things I don't like about this bike. I think the place I'll start off with is the mileage odometer. Now, for some strange reason on this particular bike, Triumph have decided to hide it a bit within the menus. So the overall mileage figure for this bike is something that you can only see when you turn the bike off and when the TFT display goes through its sort of closing sequences and what have you. It only shows that figure very briefly at the end. It's a fairly minor point, but it's something I would say is slightly annoying. At number 2, again, not that these are in any particular order, I would also make mention of a couple of features on here which I find a little bit gimmicky. That would be the Bluetooth connectivity, the headset connectivity, and the GoPro connectivity. Bluetooth, to some extent, I can kind of understand. It is somewhat nice to have sort of an app you can have on your phone to sort of look at various information and bits and pieces on the bike. That's one thing, but again, still I wouldn't regard that as an essential. The GoPro connectivity and the headset connectivity I find a bit more pointless and a bit more useless. I regularly film with GoPros on this bike, and having explored the GoPro connectivity options, it doesn't really seem like it adds anything useful to there. From experience, the only thing you're able to do is literally just start and stop recording. You're not able to sort of take advantage of any features that you would on the GoPro app on your phone, for example. No extra features anyway, so having that available on the bike might be theoretically useful in certain cases, but in my experience, I haven't found it particularly useful. And knowing that Triumph would have put research and development money into this, and it would have had a knock-on effect on the retail price of the bike, it's a little bit annoying. It's not sort of a massive point by any means, but I just don't really see the point of it. Ditto for the headset connectivity. I have found that when using a headset that's connected to my phone via Bluetooth, or even just with my partner on the back, it can interfere with it, and it can be a bit annoying. It does make it quite ambiguous as to what device fits where in the whole web of connectivity between them. And again, it's a little bit ambiguous as to what having that feature actually adds. So that would be sort of number 2. At number 3, I would probably put the under-seat phone compartment on there as well. Not that it really is a phone compartment, because it's actually far too small for any modern phone to fit in. Now, I have a fairly regularly sized Samsung Galaxy phone myself. It's not the big version or the fancy version or anything like that. It, you know, is a little bit old now. Even so, I can't fit it in there, even with the case off and what have you. So it sort of raises the question as to what that compartment is for. So again, nice to have in theory, but a little bit pointless in practice. I would also, at number 4, make mention of the seat comfort. For touring and doing long distances, it's okay, it's adequate, but after 1.5 hours or 2 hours, especially by those points, I have personally noticed that it does get a bit uncomfortable. You do have to sort of move around a bit, and longer distances than that, you're looking at increasing levels of discomfort. It's very far from the worst seat in the world, but at the same time, I feel like more could have been done just to make it a little bit more comfortable. I appreciate that there does have to be some compromise between making the seat comfortable and making it sort of sporty and engaging, but I don't know. I feel a better balance could have been struck on that front. Number 5, the last thing I'll make mention of, is just the price of the accessories, and probably with Triumph more broadly as well. I think certainly when this bike came out in 2020, this was a brand new model. So finding accessories from third parties was obviously at that point a bit difficult because they hadn't had time. The bike hadn't been on the market very long. So charging high prices for these accessories, I don't know. I thought that was a little bit cheeky. Certainly for things like pannier racks as well, which, you know, this bike is going to get used for touring and long distances. I thought that was a little bit cheeky on Triumph's part and a bit unnecessary. There are other manufacturers out there which do accessories, their own brand accessories, for less money. There are other manufacturers out there who have had, you know, competitor bikes out for longer, out on the market for longer periods of time, where third-party accessories are a bit more widely available. Certainly sticking on the theme of accessories, needless to say, after having this bike for 15 months, I have fitted a few of my own, most of which, all of which in fact, are from third parties. The first thing I did before I got into off-roading was to fit an aftermarket exhaust on there. This particular one I've got from Scorpion. They describe it as a half system. In reality, it's just a slip-on end can. It does do a fair bit to make the bike lighter. And it does do a bit to make the bike sound a bit better as well, especially with the baffle removed. The only thing I would say with that purchase is, if you're having to prioritize what you're going to do with the bike, I would not have made it my first priority. It does make it a bit lighter, it does make it sound a bit nicer, but my personal opinion, for the money, it wasn't the best value thing I would have done. If you have a list of priorities, I put that one more towards the bottom. Ironically, that was the first modification I made to the bike. The one I've made most recently is the one I would make first, and that is the tyres. Now, these came with Bridgestone AX41s. They're fantastic in a sort of sport touring capacity. They're brilliant on road. They were sort of brilliant in all the time I've had them as well. Absolutely no complaints at all, even in sort of not so nice colder weather. I've changed them just by virtue of wanting to dip my toes a bit more into off-roading. I've got the Dunlop Trail Mission 50/50 tyres. I've had them for not that long, but I have done a couple of trips on them now. Certainly for road use, for touring, for even going through the wet on the road, which I was initially a bit concerned about. They were absolutely fine. Using them sort of in conjunction with the traction control on this bike, I've not had any issues. They're perfectly good and actually slightly better than I was expecting for that capacity. I have used them off-road very briefly, and as is with the bike itself, if you just want to take it on a few gravel roads or something that's sort of low to medium difficulty but not too gnarly, these are absolutely fine. They are particularly good if you want to get into a bit of slightly deeper gravel as well. They do have these sort of side lugs which help them sort of dig in a bit better, and they do offer a bit more grip. The third thing I've done is just to add the rear rack, the luggage rack on top of that, and the side racks as well. These are all from SW Motec, which is a company based in Germany. And as is with most things that come out of Germany, these are of exceptional quality and surprisingly good value for money as well, especially compared to the sort of Triumph stock parts. The instructions that came with them were very clear. They're very easy to install. Certainly in using them, they've got lots of points to sort of tie things on as well. They're easy to use in conjunction with a variety of sort of luggage rolls, luggage straps and what have you. Even the side racks, I've been able to use them with a pair of XL Moto saddlebags. that are waterproof. I'll leave a link to those in the description as well, but just a cheap pair of £50 side bags. These worked with those very nicely indeed. You can of course get the SW Motec bags, but they are a bit more expensive. If you're looking to do just a fairly short trip and just save a little bit of money, those XL Moto saddlebags are a very good option indeed. They do keep your stuff nice and dry as well. The final thing I'll mention with regards to sort of accessories, bits and pieces, I have added a quad lock handlebar mount as well. This particular one I've got in chrome just because I use it on the Speed Twin. It does suit that bike a bit better in terms of its aesthetics, but nevertheless it's very handy, just even when I'm commuting or touring or what have you, just to have my phone up there to use it as a sat nav. You can use Triumph's own turn-by-turn satellite navigation, but to be honest, if you're having to download an extra app from Triumph and you already have Google Maps on your phone or Waze, it's just much easier to use that setup than the turn-by-turn system from Triumph. Yeah, I mean, that's a set of things I have there just to make the bike a bit better for the uses that I have, for taking it for a bit of off-roading with the tyres, for taking it touring with the luggage rack and the side racks, and even using it for touring and commuting every day with the quad lock phone mount. In this section I'll just go through some of the running costs. I won't go into too much detail with regards to numbers, but it is good just to sort of give you an outline of various areas to look out for. For servicing, you have your annual service at 6,000 miles, and you have your valve clearance checks, which need to be done at 12,000 miles. Either if you're an existing owner or you are looking to get one of these second hand. The first thing I will mention is my experience with the steering bearings. These are supposed to have a very approximate life of about 10 years. I've had to replace them within 5. I was made aware, I can't remember the specific details, but there was an issue from the factory with some of the pinch bolts being done up too tight. That has then subsequently led to the premature wear of the steering bearings themselves, and it did end up in me needing to get them replaced after just 5 years, which I have to say I wasn't best pleased with when it failed its MOT, but there we are. The other thing to keep an eye out for with regards to expensive surprises is the valve clearance checks. Now, on this particular model, the 2020 model, Triumph have said they should be checked at about 12,000 miles. My bike is coming up to, I think, around about 10,000 miles now, so that is something I'll need to keep an eye out for going forward. Again, if you're buying one of these second hand, it is worth checking the mileage figure, and it is worth asking the owner, have they had the valves checked yet? Food for thought on that front. I will add, as a bit of a side note for a very vague indication of reliability, on the 2024 version of this bike, which has pretty much the same engine and internals, albeit with a bit more power, Triumph have said for the 2024 version of this engine that the valve checks need to be done at 18,000 miles. Obviously, with this being a brand new bike and a brand new engine, I suspect that Triumph were perhaps erring on the side of caution when it came to that. Obviously, given the fact that they've increased them by 6,000 miles since, with effectively the same engine, they probably have a bit more confidence in it now. So if you do get to the 12,000 mark, I guess you could take that as a very vague indication that they probably don't need doing right away, but obviously being 12,000 miles, they still need to be done at some point in the near future, if you reach that point. With regards to insurance, it's obviously not going to be the cheapest to insure. I mean, if you're already looking at a bike in this category, you're definitely going to save some money versus a 1200 GS, a 1250 GS, a 1300 GS, anything from KTM or Yamaha especially. Compared to its rivals, it's not especially bad. If it does help, I'll leave some general indicative quotes for my circumstances here. I am 28 years old, so being 28 years old does not bode well in the eyes of insurers, but I do have a few years no claims bonus under my belt, and it is kept in a garage. With regards to vehicle tax in the UK, this is obviously this is a 900cc engine, so that does put it in the tax band of being over 600cc's. That gives you a cost of about £117 a year in tax. With regards to fuel, again, I've taken this on a couple of big trips now. If you stick it in road mode, I've been able to get about 50 miles to gallon out of it on average, just using the onboard trip computer. For what it is, a relatively big engine, I would say that's about okay in terms of fuel consumption. If you're commuting, especially in a busy city like London, you are going to get less. I would put that at more around 35 miles per gallon in my experience under those circumstances. So hopefully that gives you a bit of food for thought on that front. So overall, this is an absolutely fantastic bike. I mean, one of the reasons I love it is just because it is so many bikes in one. And if you compare that to having a second bike, or just ultimately different bikes for different purposes, it is really good value for money. As I've mentioned before, the overall sort of looks and appearance do really help to make it stand out. As mentioned, I get quite a few compliments from, people just passing by when I'm commuting. Triumph and the head designer have done a really fantastic job on that front. I've used it again for sort of a bit of off-roading. If you're looking to do anything that's sort of low to medium difficulty, it's, a fantastic choice. There are some obvious things to look out for, like I've mentioned, especially with the valve checks and the steering bearings, but especially versus, some of the bigger capacity bikes, it's a fantastic option to have. And it's arguably, I would say, in real terms, no less capable than those options. Realistically speaking, it is more of a touring or road bike or road adventure bike than it is off-road. It is more at home on road than some of its other rivals. Think the Tenere 700, think the KTM 790 or 890 Adventure. But even so, you shouldn't avoid going off-road for that reason. Overall, I've really enjoyed using this bike so far. I've had some fantastic experiences with it. It really has taken me places. And I absolutely love it, and I'm really looking forward to seeing where I'm going to go with it next. I think if I do take off-roading a bit more seriously, it is probably worth investing in some things like sort of pannier guards for the front, or just some side guards, so that when it does inevitably get dropped, it is just a bit less of a shock. That's it for this video. My name is Ollie, and I'd like to thank you very much for watching, especially if you've made it this far. It really does mean a lot for people to subscribe to the channel, to like the video, and do of course leave any feedback that you have for the video in the comments section below. As mentioned in one of my previous videos, if you're there to just be spiteful or unhelpful, then I'm probably not going to read it, and I don't really have any time for that. But, any constructive criticism that you have is more than welcome. I will, of course, take it on board and think about how to use it in future videos. And yeah, once again, thank you very much for watching. If you have time, do feel free to check out a couple of other videos I have on my channel. And until then, I shall see you in the next one. Ciao, ciao for now.